The Boshin War in 1868 was a pivotal moment in Japan's history, and its effects would be felt all the way through the Second World War. But to understand it, we have to go back further in time, and the character that would be one of the most important wasn't even Japanese, but was an American named Matthew Perry. On July 8, 1853, Commodore Matthew Perry led 4 ships into Edo Bay with the intention of reopening Japan to trading with the Broad West. See, previously, it isolated itself, only allowing trade from the Dutch and Chinese, and only from a specified area if they had special charters. Why did Perry want trade with Japan? Well, America had just annexed California, and with that came the opportunity to have constant trade with China. Japan would make a nice port in between these long voyages. Oh, and Japan was rumored to have a ton of coal. I would like to quickly point out that Perry was not the first American to try to open Japan up to trade. In the 1830s, the U.S. Navy tried several times, but were denied each time. And in 1844, William II of the Netherlands urged that Japan open itself to trade with the other nations, well, because they might use force to open them. Japan rejected this, of course. Before leading his ships into the bay, Matthew Perry had led his ships to the Ryukyu and Bonin Islands, each time claiming territory for America and demanding the people there assist him. Now, in Edo Bay, he expected the same. His ship fired blank shots from 73 guns to demand attention and claimed that if they fought, America would destroy them. He would later make the claim that this was done in celebration of America's independence. A letter addressed from President Millard Fillmore to the Emperor of Japan was then presented to the Japanese. This, of course, just showed how little America understood Japanese culture. See, if they did, they would have known that the real power in Japan at this time was the shogun. On the 11th, with the current shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu sick, the request to deliver the letter was accepted, as it was decided that it didn't violate their sovereignty. July 14th, Perry's fleet was asked to move to Kurihama, where he then handed the letter to the Japanese delegates and then left for Hong Kong. He told them he would be back in 1 year. On February 13th, 1854, he returned, which was only 6 months and not a full year. He also had 10 ships, not 4 this time, with more men. These were military men, by the way. On March 8th, he was allowed to land near modern-day Yokohama. Under the threat of force, the treaty, known as the Convention of Kanagawa, was signed on the 31st of March. The treaty itself had 12 articles. Mutual peace between the United States and the Empire of Japan. Open the ports of Shimoda and Hakodate. Assistance must be provided to shipwrecked American sailors. Shipwrecked sailors cannot be imprisoned or mistreated. Freedom of movement for temporary foreign residents in treaty ports with limitations. Trade transactions must be permitted and currency exchange to facilitate any trade transactions to be allowed. Provisioning of American ships to be a Japanese government monopoly. Japan to give the United States any favorable advantages which might be negotiated by Japan with any other foreign government in the future. Forbidding the United States from using any other ports aside from Shimoda and Hakodate. Opening of an American consulate at Shimoda. Treaty to be ratified within 18 months of signing. This treaty was signed without the shogun, Ieyasu at the time, or the current emperor, Komei. Something that would have been impossible as interactions with foreigners would be unthinkable. Instead, it was done with representatives of the shogun led by the scholar diplomat Hayashi Akita. Even though he wasn't there, Emperor Komei did endorse the treaty, even though he wasn't happy to do so. By February 21st, 1855, it was ratified. This would start a chain of other treaties signed with other Western powers, such as the United Kingdom in October of the same year, Russia in 1855, France in 1858, and others would follow. It probably doesn't need to be said by will anyway. This was not popular amongst the Japanese populace. Many of them also viewed this as a sign of weakness in the government. It also did not help that Emperor Komei wasn't happy with it either and talked about it with those around him. It stands to reason that these talks filtered out into the populace. As for Matthew Perry, he would leave the meeting thinking that he had met with the Imperial Authority of Japan. He then boarded his ship and sailed to Hakodate and Shimada, which would be the ports for his country's trade ships. After this, he would set his ships in the direction of the United States. Arriving there in 1855, Congress would then pass a vote to reward him with $20,000, the equivalent of $500,000 in today's money. This, of course, wasn't the only American mission to Japan. In 1858, another treaty known as the Treaty of Amity and Commerce would be signed aboard the USS Powhatan. Perry was not someone that could be viewed as fair. However, he was a lot closer to that than the representative, Townsend Harris, would come off as. He would demand further ports open, the rights for United States citizens to be permanently able to reside in Japan and own land. This included the building of churches, and probably the most egregious part, exempting American citizens from Japanese law while in Japan. Many of the members in the Tokugawa shogunate resisted the treaty, but they eventually agreed to its terms when Harris made it clear that refusal would lead to conflict between Japan and the United States. He also guaranteed that Japan would lose any war between them, and the new terms would be much harsher. The shogunate was in a tough spot. On one hand, the people of Japan were becoming increasingly agitated over the whole ordeal, and both anger towards their government and towards foreigners grew every day. Phrases like "expel the barbarians" became very common in the city streets. However, what could they do? The United States was indeed more powerful, and the shogunate knew it. They also knew that the United States was more than willing to use force to get its way. The shogunate was also keenly aware of how devastating the Opium War between the Qing dynasty in China and the United Kingdom had been some 2 decades ago. On top of that, the Second Opium War was currently going on as this treaty was being discussed. So when Townsend Harris told them that they would be attacked if they didn't sign it, it was a promise more than it was a threat. The treaty itself was ratified during the first Japanese mission to the United States in 1860. As I said before, the Japanese population was increasingly agitated, something that Inosuke, a signer of the treaty, found out on March 24, 1860, during the festival called Himamatsuri. Inosuke was then a leader with 60 guards outside the gates of Edo Castle when 17 ronin attacked the front of the entourage and drew attention. This allowed a samurai from Satsuma named Arima Jesayamon to run next to Inosuke's leader and fire a revolver right into it. He then dragged the injured man out and cut his head out and then committed harakiri on the spot. This would be known as the Sakuradamon Incident. The manifesto of the conspirators read as such: "We are fully aware of the necessity for some change in policy due to the coming of the Americans. Yet it is against the interests of the country and a stain on our national honor to open up commercial relations with foreigners, to admit foreigners into the castle, and to conclude treaties with them. Allow these foreigners to build places of worship for their evil religion, and to allow foreign ministers to reside in our lands. We have thus consecrated ourselves to be the instruments of heaven, to punish these wicked men, and have taken upon ourselves the duty of ending a serious evil by killing this disgusting politician." An incredible statement, if there ever was one. Oh, well, hey, look at that. You made it all the way to the end. That means you've earned yourself a cookie. Go ahead, take one. You've earned it.